in the COVID closet here in the red part of California. Hi, everyone. It's Emil. It's Emil Guillermo. Emil, I'm up to you. It's really just a radio show. You know, it's not really a secret podcast, although it is secret. And it is a podcast of sorts. But Emil Amok's Takeout, if you looked it up on podcast sites, I did a podcast where I did regular interviews and it's all there. And then I started doing this live show and I thought, oh, I'll just host it here and we'll see who comes. And so that's the way it's been. And we've done 637 episodes now. And so this is Emil Amok's Takeout, my takes on all things considerable. Essentially, I'll go through newspapers. I still get newspapers. Some people think, oh, how charming. He still uses newspapers. But yeah, I'll go through newspapers and I'll go through the news and I'll just give my opinion. We'll talk about it. Talk about, one of the subheads or subtitles of this program is WDAAT. What does Asian American think? Because they never ask. And, I'll give an Asian American perspective. That's usually been my thing. Even when I worked in the mainstream media and then did most of my work in the ethnic media, Asian American, Filipino, African American media. And so it's like a call and response thing. Here's the news. Here's my take. Emil Amok's Takeout. As I said, my takes on all things considerable, and welcome to it. Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific Live, we're usually here. And then if you catch us on replay, we're on YouTube at Emil Amok1, on Twitter at Emil Amok, on Facebook, fb.com/EmilGuillermo.media. That's where you can find us. And then, if you've missed any or all, just go to the beginnings and then check out where we've been, what we've talked about. We talked about Florence Pan yesterday and about her grilling of the Trump attorney in the immunity case. We're going to talk about different cases. Today, if you've been following the news, Trump has been at the civil case on corporate fraud in New York, and that just ended. We'll talk about that in a second. But, I talked about Florence Pan, the judge, and how she got this admission from the Trump attorney that essentially Trump believes that in the immunity case that he has license to kill. I mean, that was the headline in the New York Times. I was reading Adam Liptak's analysis. Trump's boldest legal argument yet. The president has a license to kill. And I thought, how many presidents have legally killed anyone? And then you got to think back. It wasn't directly the president. It might have been maybe the CIA involved in an assassination. So, the president would have cover. Oh, it wasn't me. It was the CIA. And then, or maybe, in the case of presidents past, you'd have to go back historically to really fact check. Has it ever happened that a president has a license to kill? And then, that people who are virulent supporters of any president would say, of course he has a license to kill. He's the commander in chief. Well, I don't know. Does that give him the light? He's kind of ceremonial. Well, no, he is indeed the commander in chief, but more ceremonial. I mean, he wouldn't get out there on a white horse with a sword and try to chop people's heads off or anything like that. But there would be some people who would have no argument with that. The idea that a president has a license to kill. And yet, the idea of it is, it's, as Liptak pointed out in his news analysis, it's jaw-dropping. It is jaw-dropping, which is kind of cliche, but what else could you say? It is jaw dropping to hear the attorney for the president admit to that. Yeah, he's and it all stems from that SEAL Team 6 questioning that was started by Judge Florence Pan on Tuesday and answered by John Sauer, the Trump attorney. I'll get into that because for beginning that line of questioning, I think Judge Florence Pan of the DC Circuit, I think she deserves to be, I think she's the new Asian American hero. Because I think everyone is this kind of, they never saw it so clearly until after she pointed it out in that cross-examination. And it just, I think some people are stunned, and it came up in last night's debate. I said yesterday that wouldn't it be great if they asked a question? If a president, I was thinking more they'd ask a question like, if you were president, would you feel like you had the license or the immunity or whatever? But no, they asked it far more skillfully. We'll get into that because in that one question about that, in terms of the debate, I mean, everyone's talking about the squabbling. They, Nikki Haley and DeSantis went after each other, kind of in this sort of, it was definitely a clash, right? But in terms of substance, that question about the immunity case of Trump elicited answers that if that was the only answer you heard, you got the crystal clear difference between Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. So we'll get into that. Chris Christie's out. It's kind of unfortunate because he actually, I thought, was better than the two remaining primary candidates on the Republican side. I don't agree with him, but, he was at least attacking Trump. But that Trump immunity question, I'll play it in a sec. It gave the candidates a real opportunity to attack Trump as much as they feel comfortable right now. They're going to have to feel far more comfortable, but they don't, right? But they did attack him on the basis of that question. And then again in the closing. And so I thought it was an okay debate. I'm not a Republican, but I was amused by it. I'm not a big DeSantis fan, less of a Nikki Haley fan, but I think she just kind of edges him out a bit in terms of if I were a Republican and I had to pick. So we'll get into that in a second. I do want to mention that the Trump, the civil, the fraud trial ended. And it's funny, the judge was, I thought yesterday the judge had said that he was just taking back his offer to allow Trump to speak. But this morning, Trump did end up speaking. And then I'm sure it was because the judge wanted to let everyone know that he gave Trump a chance to be a blowhard. Mind you, there's no way that Trump in this civil fraud trial could affect the verdict. I mean, he was found guilty of fraud, right? But they were not. This is the penalty phase. So the idea is, what would Trump say that would get the judge, because this is a bench trial, not a jury trial. What would Trump say that would get the judge to say, okay, we're not going to fine you $370 million. That's too much. Or we're not going to bar you from New York, or we're not going to bar your kids, or we're not going to take away your ability to do business in New York. I don't know if he achieved that from the reporting of what Trump said. The Times says Mr. Trump's remarks were chaotic and emotional and lasted only minutes, during which he impugned the Attorney General Letitia James, a Democrat, saying she hates Trump and uses Trump to get elected. He also took aim at the judge, Arthur Engeron, remarking, "You have your own agenda. I certainly understand that." He added, as the judge stared stonily at him, "You can't listen for more than 1 minute." Wow. I mean, personal attacks of the judge, very charming. Justice Engeron instructed the former president's lawyer to control your client, in quotes. But Mr. Trump continued until the lunch break. So, I mean, I don't know if Trump helped himself, but a few minutes ago, the trial ended, and the judge was actually kind of charming. Is that the word? Charming? He said he ended the trial by thanking the court staff again, and he specifically mentioned the sketch artist, saying, "Try to do a better job on my face, though." And then all was done. And so Engeron now takes everything that was said and done and will have a written decision. He says sometime before the end of the month. He says it's not a promise or a guarantee, but that he's confident he'll be able to meet his deadline. But that's kind of, where we are on that civil fraud case. And so that's significant because the penalty, right? I mean, $370 million for Trump. Is that really chump change? Well, it depends on if he has as much money as he says he does. But the real issue may be, hey, he's not going to be able to do business in New York. He could be barred from that. And so his sons could be barred for a number of years. So let's see what happens there. A significant case. And certainly, as I said, the civil fraud case, the immunity case, it all came up last night at the DeSantis Haley debate, just the two of them. Vivek Ramaswamy didn't make the threshold. I think he had to have at least 10%. So he didn't make the threshold for the debate. It was just the two of them, DeSantis and Haley, the up and coming stars of the Republican Party, I guess you could say that. And on the issues, there was clear difference. They weren't the same. There's some differences there between them. I don't like either of them for the differences, but it was on the question of the immunity case, whether Trump had immunity, that I found some of the most clarifying answers. And it also gave them both a chance to attack Trump in the way that they could, or in the way in which they feel comfortable. They're going to have to feel far more comfortable attacking Trump. But here was the question. It was Jake Tapper's question. The Jake Tapper's question was, "I'm wondering if you agree with the argument that Donald Trump's lawyers made in court that a president should have immunity for any conduct in office, including," as the judge asked, "ordering the assassination of a political rival, unless the president gets impeached and convicted by the Senate for the offense first." Keep in mind how difficult this is. No one has ever been impeached and convicted. They've been impeached by the House because it requires a supermajority in the Senate. There's rarely been in a conviction. It hasn't been a conviction. And Trump is of the four impeachments we've had, Trump is half of them. So this is why this is historic, right? So here is DeSantis's answer. it's kind of instructive.
Well, obviously, that attorney gave the case away on that explanation. I think the D.C. Circuit is going to rule against Donald Trump on that issue.
So now that's interesting. He says he's acting like a rational Republican, DeSantis, saying, well, yeah, it's ridiculous that Donald Trump would say, his attorneys would say that. And yeah, his attorneys gave away the case. That was honest. Because I don't think you'll get that level of honesty from people who are Trump supporters. I just don't. And they back Trump to the hilt. They'll say, oh, that's Trump. And so, to me, that's about as aggressive as DeSantis has been in trying to get at Donald Trump. I mean, it's a far more aggressive than saying, well, Donald Trump ought to be here to answer those questions. Far more aggressive, to say that, well, the attorney gave away the case. D.C. court is going to rule against Trump. That was DeSantis' way of being aggressive.
I'm not exactly sure what the outer limits are. I don't think it's necessarily been litigated. It's not going to be an issue with me because I'm always going to follow the Constitution.
Oh, always follow the Constitution, except, book banning. I guess, First Amendment has some limitations, and if it doesn't agree with your political, your political leanings, you can ban any book you want, as DeSantis has in Florida.
And we're gonna uphold the best traditions of the office, and I'm going to be a president you can be proud of.
We can be proud of DeSantis and what he's done to repress rights of people of color, banning books, what he's done in the education system there. I don't know.
I think it's important that people be able to look to the president and say, hey, that's somebody that's worthy of emulating. And so
worthy of emulating. I hate to keep going back to the book banning, but you wouldn't want that in your state on a federal level because DeSantis said or thought that, hey, it worked in Florida. It's going to work for the nation.
My wife and I, we just view ourselves to try to do well for our kids and to make sure they're proud of us, and we set a good example. So that's what we would do in that situation. But I think there's a larger issue Republicans have got to think of. Donald Trump's going to lose that appeal. He's going to end up going to trial in front of a stacked left-wing D.C. jury of all Democrats. What are the odds that he's going to get through that?
So that is another example of going back to Donald Trump's not going to get out of his legal problems. Here's the bigger question that Republicans are going to have to ask, and it's probably one of the, what would you say? It's probably one of the frank and candid moments there that DeSantis talked about Trump all night.
Been talking about the validity of the charges. I don't think he gets through that. And so what are we going to do as Republicans in terms of who we nominate for president? If Trump is the nominee, it's going to be about January 6th, legal issues, criminal trials. The Democrats and the media would love to run with that.
It's not that the Democrats would love to run or the media would love to run with that. It's just that it's the fact, right? If it's Donald Trump running and he's got all these legal problems, the issue is going to be about January 6th. It's going to be about his legal issues. It's going to be about the criminal trials. And that was as aggressive as DeSantis was last night, trying to appeal to Republicans to be, I guess, normal in a way, or to be honest about what it means to back Trump. So I have to give DeSantis some props for doing that. He could have hit a little harder. And of course, as he tries to make himself look good, he doesn't really help himself on that. Now, here's the same question asked of Nikki Haley. The question was, do you agree with the argument Donald Trump's lawyer made in court that a president should have immunity for any conduct, including on ordering the assassination of a political rival, unless that president is impeached and convicted by the Senate for that offense first? And here was Nikki Haley's answer.
That's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. I mean,
see, now that is the way you answer with passion. That is a kind of like a visceral response to something. And to go back to the Harvard hearing, the congressional hearing, Claudine Gay and the other two university presidents, when they were asked questions about on-campus anti-Semitism, they should have responded with that kind of verb, right? I mean, that so you ask a question and she knew it was coming. Nikki Haley in this case, she knew the question, but to hear her say it or to hear her answer, it sounds like, hey, this is honest, this is real, and you betcha, this is how I feel. So they asked about the president's immunity, and her answer is clear.
That's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, we need to use some common sense here. You can't go and kill a political rival and then claim, immunity from a president. I think we have to start doing things that are right. And,
this is almost like a common sense moment for Republicans, not just never Trumpers. This is just all the people who say, it's Trump, he's going to win, we want power. This is that moment for people who are still rational, who aren't part of the cult. This was an example of the thinking process. When that question about Trump feeling he has immunity and saying essentially license to kill, when that question was posed to both DeSantis and Haley, you hear the thinking process. And I hope Republicans heard that. I'm not a Republican, but I hope Republicans heard that, and I hope they're mindful of how they're responding to a president, a former president, who says essentially he does have a license to kill. He does have immunity from any criminal prosecution because he's president. And Nikki Haley was right when she was asked that question, if a president has that kind of immunity.
That's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, we need to use some common sense here. You can't go and kill a political rival and then claim, immunity from a president. I think we have to start doing things that are right. And, Ron said we should have leaders that we can look up to. Well, then stop lying, because nobody's going to want to look up to you if you're lying. But
she put in a dig. She said, this is where I agree with DeSantis, but DeSantis is a liar, and she mentioned that website, DeSantisLies.com. Apparently, there's some half truths out there that he likes to put out. But Haley, I think this is one of her best answers because it incorporates all of these things. It bashed Trump in the way that she felt comfortable, because no one feels comfortable if you're a Republican bashing Trump. And it bashed DeSantis. More Haley on the same question.
I do think we need to look at is, what has President Trump done? You look at the last few years, and our country is completely divided. People think that if someone doesn't divide it. People think that if someone doesn't divide it.
See, now this is really another candid moment. It's like no one, and Christie pointed this out last night when he exited the field. He said, ask people, if someone stole the election or who's the legitimate winner of the 2020 election, and if they would support Trump, even though, and that really is it. And Christie's been the only one to be out there in front, attacking Trump and telling the truth. Now, here's a little more truth from two of the Republican frontrunners, or after Trump, they're frontrunners, because Trump still has a huge lead in Iowa, less of a lead in New Hampshire, and maybe that is where things are going to catch up. Things are going to catch up with Trump, and people are going to have to realize, hey, Trump has too many legal problems to be president of the United States. But this admission about, look at what Trump has done, when Haley asked that, pretty telling.
You look at the last few years, and our country is completely divided. It's divided over extremes. It's divided over hatred. It's divided over the fact that people think that if someone doesn't agree with you, that they're bad. And now we have leaders in our country that decide who's good and who's bad, who's right and who's wrong. That's not what a leader does. What a leader does is they bring out the best in people and get them to see the way forward. That's what we need in our country. We don't need this chaos anymore. We need someone who's going to be a new generational leader that brings sanity back to America.
Thank you so much.
I thought that she showed the passion there. In the moment, she answered that question spontaneously. And to me, much better than DeSantis. So as I'm listening for clash, they definitely clash with each other, even though they basically have the same stance that, Trump has too many legal problems. Of course, they don't agree that Trump's right in his analysis that a president has immunity. And then Haley went one further, saying that look at the chaos that he's caused, a completely divided country.
Over hatred, it's divided over the fact that people think that if someone doesn't agree with you, that they're bad. And
see, now that's the thing. If people don't agree with you, people think you're bad. And to me, that's telling. That really is the Trump way. It's total combat. It's warfare. It's like civil debate, forget civility. We're enemies. And who did that to our politics? Our politics has always had a kind of partisan edge, but every now and then we had enough in the well of goodwill to bring up bipartisan sensibilities. I would say a majority of the time. Even when I worked up on the Hill and I saw it in action, I saw my boss reaching across the aisle talking to rabid Republicans. They were collegial. It wasn't total warfare. But now we have, Haley expressed it well when she says, it's divided over the fact that people think that if someone doesn't agree with you, they're bad. And now we have leaders in our country that decide who's good and who's bad, who's right and who's wrong. And, if President Trump wins on that immunity thing, which I don't think he will, but, it's sinking in only because Florence Pan asked those questions, that line of questioning, and people are realizing how crazy that is. How crazy it is that, a leader could then legally assassinate someone and then be immune from it because he's president. That's what they call a dictatorship. I'm sorry, folks. They call that a dictatorship. In case, I'm Filipino, so I know dictatorships are my people, my forebears, my homeland. Well, actually, my parents' homeland. I'm an American. We don't know dictatorship. In America, we believe in democracy. So, to me, that was the telling point. You could always go to the closing remarks. The closing remarks were interesting only because Haley sort of held that she has that one issue that is really the most important thing. Most important. It is fact until a new poll comes out and doesn't show that to be true. But she says that in head-to-head against Joe Biden, only Nikki Haley, among all the Republicans, beat Joe Biden handily. Only Nikki Haley by double digits in this one poll that she likes to cite. Until there's a new one that shows that, hey, she didn't do that well in a head-to-head against Biden. She can't claim that, but she can claim that now. And when she says that, you say, if you're a Republican who thinks electability is the most important issue, maybe when the caucus comes up on Monday, you're all for Nikki Haley. I get the feeling it can happen, but DeSantis had a good ground game from all reports. He was in all the counties. He shook a lot of hands, and he's desperate. He doesn't have a consistent campaign in terms of what their message is and what they believe, but he's got to win Iowa because he doesn't look too good in New Hampshire now. But if he wins in Iowa, it'll give him momentum to get ahead of Haley in New Hampshire, and then maybe you'll see the resurrection of Ron DeSantis. But right now, if DeSantis, who to me seemed pretty desperate yesterday, if he doesn't do it in Iowa on Monday, that may be it for him. I also noticed that he kept repeating about, Trump didn't fulfill his pledge on the border. I'll build a border. We need a border. Kept talking border. Kept trying to be the new Trump, this is the tricky thing for him. He's trying not to alienate Trump lovers because DeSantis wants to be the new Trump. We need a border. We need a border wall. Trump didn't build a border wall. I'll build you a border wall. So I don't know how that's going to work out for DeSantis. So for me, just on the basis of that question about a president's immunity, Trump's immunity, license to kill, I thought Nikki Haley answered that question, got all the points in that made it you take that one question, put it side by side, and see DeSantis and see Haley, see who answered it better. If you're a Republican, who would you feel most comfortable with? And, you go to Iowa, there are a lot of, I won't say there are a lot of Asian Americans, but it's the whitest state in the nation. But when I've been through Iowa, I've met some Asian Americans and talked to them. They're very conservative. There's one liquor store owner, totally conservative. We still, we're congenial. And in fact, I'm going to talk to him after this just to get a sense of what he thinks is going to happen on Monday when they have the caucuses. But I think a very telling debate yesterday, especially that one question. If you only had to watch one question, it was that. It came in the second hour toward the end, maybe the last 30 minutes. You'll find it. Jake Tapper asked the question, well, what about that question that the Trump's attorneys said? President has immunity, and see how they answered. And of course, we are only asking, or we're only pointing this out. It was only an issue at yesterday's debate because of Judge Florence Pan. And I just want to take some time to honor Judge Pan, Florence Pan, as an Asian American hero. She serves as the U.S. Circuit Judge of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District Court, for the District of Columbia Circuit. She was a U.S. District Judge of the District Court for D.C. from 2021 to 2022, and a judge for the Superior Court of D.C. from 2009 to 2021. And it's when Ketanji Brown Jackson vacated the Court of Appeals, they looked to Florence Pan. So I think, I'm saying this bodes well for Pan's future, right? Wouldn't you think? So now I said it was Pan's parents who were the immigrants. I think I said that she was an immigrant. No, she was born in New York, born in New York City. Her parents were immigrants from Taiwan. They came here in 1961, and she was raised in New Jersey. I did get it right that she was a graduate, a summa graduate from Penn. She got a BA and a BS, summa cum laude, from the Wharton School. So exact same place where Donald Trump came from, which must needle Trump somewhat. That I guess it's sort of like, the Harvard thing when Elise Stefanik goes after Claudine Gay. Elise Stefanik, a Harvard grad, going after the Harvard president. But this is Florence Pan from Wharton. She worked at Goldman Sachs, got that right. After graduation, she went to law school at Stanford. She was an editor for the Law Review and graduated in 1993 with a JD. Now, she went to work for Judge Michael McCasey of the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York. Law clerk for Judge Ralph Winter Jr. of the U.S. Court of Appeals in the Second Circuit. And so she worked her way up, worked in government. She was an assistant U.S. attorney, 1999 to 2009. And then she worked in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia, adjunct professor, distinguished career, appointed by Joe Biden, September 23rd. Excuse me. Got the coffees. September 23rd, 2021, by Biden to the Superior Court of the District of Columbia. And then Judge, she assumed office September 26, 2022. So that, this is a woman. You go through the process. She was nominated, confirmed a couple of times. Obama nominated to the Supreme Court, or the Superior Court rather, in 2009. But then her confirmation was expired. They had to nominate her again. And then, she's passed all the different tests, right? In terms of, in terms of confirmation. Interesting, you see the pages, how when she gets the oath that people are masked up. So this is all during 2021 under Biden. I just think that sometimes we don't know our judges, and so when a vacancy comes up in the Supreme Court, we look for Asian Americans, because there hasn't been an Asian American to the Supreme Court ever. And I think there are a few names that were bandied about when Ketanji Brown Jackson was nominated, none of whom are judge. Well, there was like one judge, I think, but a couple who were like solicitors. And I think in the future, you'd have to look at someone like Florence Pan and you'd have to say, if something comes up in the next 8, 12 years, and people are looking for an Asian American, I think it would be clear that her name would be right up there. So if you haven't noticed her, this is her week. This is the week of Florence Pan. And that's why I talk about her here on Emil and Amok's Takeout. Because, as I said, if you haven't been paying attention, that question, which is, she didn't badger the Trump guy, the Trump attorney, but she asked the question. She said, could a president under SEAL Team 6, order SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival? That's an official act, an order to SEAL Team 6. And the Trump attorney said he would have to be and would speedily be impeached and convicted before the criminal prosecution. And Judge Pan came back and said, not good enough. But if he weren't, there would be no criminal prosecution or criminal liability for that. And the Trump attorney went into some long spiel about the Chief Justice's opinion in Marbury. And then Pan cut him short and said, look, I asked you a yes or no question. Could a president who ordered SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival who was not impeached, could he be subject to criminal prosecution if he were impeached and convicted first? That's what Trump attorneys John Sauer said. And Judge Pan wouldn't take it. He said she wanted to clarify. So your answer is a no? And the Trump attorney, knowing that he didn't want to upset the judge, said in the most oblique way possible, my answer is a qualified yes. In other words, no. But a qualified yes. I mean, she had him. Dead to rights, as they say. And as you saw in the debate, even DeSantis and Haley said, he's going to lose that immunity argument. And that's going to cause all the different legal problems for Trump, because if he won the legal argument on immunity, all of those things would go away. But they're not going away because he's going to lose that. He won't have immunity. He's going to have to face the music and go through the legal process as he runs for president, as it looks like he may be the Republican nominee unless Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis can convince reasonable Republicans that, oh no, we can't have that happen. Of course not. All right, so we did the debate. Oh, I wanted to do this one AI story. This kind of bothers me a bit because I've been talking about AI a lot. And, there are good uses for AI. Like AI, if I don't want to write a press release for myself, I can say, ChatGPT, give me a glowing assessment of Emil Guillermo. And, ChatGPT will do that. It could do that. That's a good way to use AI. But to create whole works and say, write an essay that Emil Guillermo would write and then put it with my byline and get my miserable, well, get my lowly fee. Not fair, right? And so this is reported in Variety today. AI generated George Carlin drops comedy special that daughter speaks out against. No machine will ever replace his genius, says Kelly Carlin. Oh, well, I agree with that. But the fact that someone wants to use AI to come out with a script that George Carlin would do, why not just have another comedian who does George Carlin type material, have him do it and see how funny it is? Because now that you tell me that this isn't George Carlin, it is AI inspired, somehow it's not funny anymore. It's a robot. It's a artificially generated script based on understanding of what George Carlin's cadence and what his topics are, what his humor might be. And as a test, okay, so I saw it. It's online and it's on YouTube, and I listened to it, and knowing that it's not George Carlin, and mind you, they do all the disclaimers up top. This is not George Carlin, they say. This is sort of like an impressionist version of George Carlin, like, Will Ferrell doing, his impression of, and he mentions famous impression, or the AI bot mentions famous impressionists. Hal Holbrook as Mark Twain, for example. It's not Mark Twain, but it's Mark Twain's words. That's the difference. It's a human being, so you still might laugh at that. The late Hal Holbrook when he did Mark Twain. I mean, that's the thing about when it's the words from George Carlin. It might be interesting to hear actual words of George Carlin delivered by a robot performer. Maybe that would be funny. But to hear artificially intelligent AI created material as if George Carlin presented in a 1 hour special, I wasn't laughing. It wasn't funny. You sort of denudor the setup and the punch by coming out and saying, this isn't George Carlin. Okay, so why am I listening? This isn't George Carlin, but it could be. It's like an impression. Okay. It's his topics. Okay. Play it. And so many, like I said, so many statements to let you know you're not listening to George Carlin. But it's AI generated George Carlin, so it's kind of cool, but it's not cool, right? It should be cooler than it is. Oh, wow. George Carlin back from the dead. But it isn't. So you listen to it and you say, all right, kind of good. But once again, it's just struck me as not as interesting as it might seem at first. Maybe if they gave the material to a fledgling comic who wants to be the second coming of George Carlin, maybe then it would be funny. But now it just seems kind of gimmicky and like, why? And this is what the people who dropped the special said. They said, I just want to let you know very clearly that what you're about to hear is not George Carlin. It's my impersonation of George Carlin that I developed in the exact same way a human impressionist would. Okay. So think of it like Andy Kaufman impersonating Elvis, or like Will Ferrell impersonating George W. Bush. Okay. But it's not Will Ferrell doing Bush's words, nor is it Kaufman doing Elvis's music. It's an impersonator doing made-up George Carlin stuff in the style of George Carlin, and it's not George Carlin. So once again, why? And so Kelly Carlin, Carlin's daughter, said, my dad spent a lifetime perfecting his craft from his very human life, brain, and imagination. No machine will ever replace his genius. These AI-generated products are clever attempts at trying to recreate a mind that will never exist again, she wrote on social media. Let's let the artist's work speak for itself. Humans are so afraid of the void that we can't let what has fallen into it stay there. Here's an idea. How about we give some actual living human comedians a listen to? But if you want to listen to the genuine George Carlin, he has 14 specials that you can find anywhere. And that really was my feeling. I said, nice gimmick to hear an AI generated what could have been George Carlin, but ultimately not nearly as interesting as the perpetrators expected or wanted. And I don't think Kelly Carlin was in on it, which is kind of weird because they're just using her father as inspiration. And so it could be any comic, but I would rather hear it from a comic, an actual comic, an actual human being, rather than here is a robot trying to relate to human life and why he's upset with Republicans and Democrats and the bureaucracy and his stuff, my stuff. Anyway, so one last that last thing on AI. Thought I had to mention it. A little music interlude. So that's it for the show today. Literally, I'm in my closet here, and it's a little tight, and I'm having a coughing fit. Anyway, I just want to say that, as I announced on my other shows this week, the dates of my New York performances are out. Also, the dates are my Fresno shows. See, I'm supposed to say this too. I don't think the tickets are available yet, but the shows, Emil, Amok, Lost NPR host, and other stories. One story about being married to PETA. Oh, that'll be a good one. So I'll be in Fresno at the Rogue Festival, Saturday, March 22nd, or March 2nd at 2 p.m. Saturday, March 2nd, and also, Saturday's a big day, Saturday, March 2nd at 9:30. So like a double header, 2 p.m. and at 9:30 p.m. on Saturday, March 2nd. Sunday, March 3rd, 2 p.m. Thursday, March 7th at 5:30 p.m. and Saturday, March 9th at 5 p.m. That's at the Rogue Festival in Fresno. Usually come, a lot of interesting artists from all around the world participate. Martin Dockery usually gets to the Rogue Festival. I'll be there on March 2nd. Then in New York City, April 5th, April 8th, April 13th, April 19th, and April 21st. All different times. Can't get your tickets yet, but it's at the New York City Fringe. April 15th, April 8th, April 13th, April 19th, and April 21st. So that's where I'm going to be performing my shows live. A little different from this show, which is more me talking about the news, as if I were doing my radio show. It's a little more laid back. It's me talking to you. And I'm here Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific live. Hey, check it out live. Or check it out on the recording at YouTube at Emil Amok 1, fb.com/EmilGuillermo.media, Twitter or X at Emil Amok. Go to it. Use your finger. Go to the beginning. And we'll be back tomorrow. Hopefully, we'll have our friend Dan Gonzalez usually joins us when we talk about the week. We're heading into Martin Luther King weekend. So I wonder if people have thought about that. Martin Luther King Day is going to be on the Iowa Caucus Day, which is strange because on the day that we celebrate Martin Luther King, we get election results from perhaps one of the widest states in the country. But they don't even talk about the black vote. But people are talking about the black vote in advance of New Hampshire and then, of course, South Carolina, which are the two big primaries coming up after Iowa. The Democrats, if you're wondering, the Democrats, they're doing a paper ballot this time. And people are allowed to send in their ballots as late as March, I believe. So it's the Republicans on Monday. Well, so I'm sure I'll talk to Dan Gonzalez about that. That's tomorrow. We like to end the show with a little meditation because it's helpful just to sit and stare at each other and do nothing. A little loving kindness, because, the thoughts in your head fly by. They're just thoughts. They're not real. Let them go. Some of the thoughts are self-critical thoughts, unloving thoughts. Just let those go. And sometimes this is a practice where you can practice self-love by letting go of some thoughts, critical thoughts that go through your head. Just let them go. And focus on the moment. Seeing what's in front of you, hearing what you hear, focusing on that, feeling sensations you feel, seeing where you feel those sensations in the body, thinking about feelings of love, self-love. In the metta, M-E-T-T-A, tradition, love of self first and then to others, and it comes back. Twofold, manifold, more. And so, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. and may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Till next time. Mahal Kita.